All right. Hello? Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. Just making a few final adjustments here before we officially get started. Okay. Oh boy, alright. How is everyone today? Excited, I hope. Hopefully the music and everything sounds alright, not too loud. Get that microphone a little bit closer. That feels good. Alright, I think we're ready to get things underway. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 1, 2. Alright, I think we're ready to get things... Yep, we're all good. So I think we can officially get started. Hello and welcome to the stream. I am Darksky. Now, on the last writing stream last week, I introduced you guys to the characters from my novel, Infinite Mageworks, and we ran through the main party and a lot of the supporting cast. That was a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun talking with people and all that stuff. And today, we're going to dive into something a bit more familiar on this channel. We are going to be talking about one of my characters from Final Fantasy XIV. My main for the majority of my Final Fantasy XIV career. A boy by the name of Morn. Alright. So, just like last week, we're going to do a bit of an introduction, and then we're going to go through his sort of story and how he started, where he is right now, and what plans I have for him in the future. So, to begin, I suppose I should show a picture. Oh, where am I? There I am. Oh, which picture do I want to use? We'll use this one, since it's the one that I used for the thumbnail. For those who don't know, this was my old main. In a lot of ways, he's my boy. This is my precious little bean, Morn. If you follow me on Twitter, you're probably a bit more familiar with his story, but actually that's my old Twitter. So yeah, not a lot of people who follow me on my current Twitter wouldn't really know his story. So this is good for everybody. Let's go ahead and hide that for now. And I think we can officially begin. So, character profile, Morn. Age, he is currently 26. Shadowbringers and Endwalker are... it's a bit hard to say, because I know how old Alphino and Alize are in my canon. And, they were 19 when Ala was 26. So if I progress past that, I'd have to progress their age as well, and Yoshi P won't let me do that, so... currently he is 26, pushing 27, I would say. date of birth. When did I say? Well, when did Jess and I say? I should start out by saying that Morn is also very heavily tied to someone else's Warrior of Light, that being Erebus Morn, his twin brother, who is written and portrayed by my good friend Jess. So their lore and their story is a bit of a collaborative effort. So what did we say about their date of birth? I'll probably have to double check with them later, but I believe it was in October. I believe it's October 7th. Race, Makote, obviously. I admit I don't know where the apostrophe goes in Makote. Does it go before the Q, or does it go before the T? I can't remember. Alias, he's had a few. Of course, there is the Warrior of Light. There is also the Azure Dragoon. And more recently, this is new lore, the Wicked White. Not an official title you can have in FF14, but I couldn't really find one that suited him. We'll get more into the meaning behind this title later. Pronouns. He, him. Sexuality. Out of all of my characters, out of all of my original characters, Morn is by far the gayest. He is the most I only like men character I think I have. Nationality. Ishgard. Raised in Ishgard, unfortunately. Patron deity. Although he's not exactly very religious, given that he slays gods for a living. Oshan is his patron deity. Jobs. Alright, so he started out as a Dragoon, then became a Dark Knight. After that, Samurai. Then after that, he went back to Dark Knight. But after that... Wait, am I thinking? Yeah, that's correct. After Samurai, he went to Dark Knight again. But then after that, Paladin. So that's where we are right now. Ah, yes. How could I forget? And later, even after that, Bard. So he's had quite the colorful history in terms of jobs and roles that he has taken up. He hasn't canonically been a healer yet, and I don't know if that would ever change. But right now he's been both tank and DPS. Hair color, black. Eye color, gold. So funny thing about his eye color, a little anecdote here. Originally, when I first made Allah and he didn't really have a whole lot of lore attached to him, he was just a character design, he had blue eyes. This was back when I first made him towards the middle of Stormblood, I want to say. And the reason why I gave him gold eyes afterward is because of Shadowbringers. It was a very popular joke for people who play Kingdom Hearts and also play Final Fantasy XIV, that when we heard of Shadowbringers and we started to theorize of what the story was going to be, and we heard the tagline, "Become what you must, become the Warrior of Darkness," a lot of Kingdom Hearts fans in the community were like, oh god, the Warrior of Light's going to get Norded. So, as a joke, I was like, you know what, I'm going to give him gold eyes, because he's becoming the Warrior of Darkness. He's becoming Norded. And it just stuck. Like, I grew attached to the look. I think it's a very good look for the black hair and gold eyes. So, yeah, it's one of those things where it starts as a joke, but then it becomes canon, you know? Alright, skin, he is pale. He's very, very pale. Height, I believe he's the tallest. He's the tallest you can make a Makote, which I believe is 5'8". Still considered short by a lot of people, honestly. Build, athletic. He is the savior of the world. He's kind of fit. Favorite food. What did I put down for this, actually? Oh, right. Of course. Sandwiches. And if I had to be more specific, I'd probably say a BLT. Nothing too extravagant. Growing up in Ishgard, he wasn't exposed to a whole lot of, like, really complex flavors. So BLT is probably his favorite sort of sandwich. And sandwiches are his favorite kind of food. Favorite drink? Hot cocoa. Best friends. So, as I mentioned before, his twin brother. Erebus Morn. And of course, Alphino and Alze. And last but not least, Grahatia. Of course, he's very close with all the Scions, but out of all of them, those four are always in his party. Nemesis. Given who he is, who he was, where he came from, and what he endured in Heaven's Ward. Thornton. I can't remember Thornton's official title. It was Archbishop. I guess we can say Archbishop. Thornton. Was it the 12th or the 13th? I can't remember, but you guys know who I'm talking about. Old Pope Man. And his theme you are currently listening to right now. It's something I like to do with my WoL seas just naturally as I progress and listen more and more to the music of Final Fantasy XIV. This song in particular is called Insanity. It is, let me write that down. Insanity. This is the track that plays when you fight Innocence in Shadowbringers. And I've always just loved, like, there's a duality to it. Like, this is just me reading into what's probably not there, but it always sounds like a bit of, like, a dance or a battle between light and darkness. Like, there's a duality to it that I've always loved, and I've adored this song ever since I first listened to it. And I just, in my mind, this is Allah's theme song. If you fight him in a boss battle, this is the song that plays. Fears. I'm sure, but let me double check. Right. So, after everything, we are discussing Allah post Endbreaker. Endbreaker? Endwalker, by the way. So this character profile represents who he is at the end of 6.0. So, roughly 6.0 to between 6.0 and 6.1 is where this character profile comes from. And we'll talk about why specifically that era in a bit. So Fears, right now, after basically slaying gods on the daily basis, and, you know, being to the literal edge of the universe, and fighting despair itself, his fear, more specifically than losing the people he loves, is finding his match. It's something he hasn't encountered yet. He felt like it came close with Xenos, but obviously that wasn't true. He won out in the end. So just, he's afraid that... Obviously, if there's anyone who is a match to him, it's his brother Erebus. But obviously they're not going to have any sort of life fight to the death anytime soon. So that's someone he can always rely on to be at his beck and call. But finding someone else that is his match, who is opposed to him, someone who can beat him is ultimately someone who can do harm to the people he loves. So that is where it is right now. Hobbies. Bit of an odd one, but something he enjoys. Goldsmithing. Smitching? Smithing. Something he sort of just picked up one day in Ul'dah. He thought, yeah, might be fun. So he started making jewelry, and it's just something he does whenever he has the free time. He doesn't always use precious metals, twine, leather, those sorts of things. And I'd like to think that a lot of the Scions have something that he has personally crafted. I know that Erebus, and Graha certainly do. So, goldsmithing. And lately, how do I label this? Farming? What would you call the occupation you take part of in Island Sanctuary? Because that's what I'm referring to. I guess I can just put tending to his island. Because currently that is what he is doing. Again, we'll talk more about that in a bit. And his goals, as much as he wishes he could say that his goals are just enjoy what he's doing right now, maybe get married, start a family, maybe. I suppose realistic goals is what this is. Realistically, he just wants to enjoy his retirement while it lasts. So when I first introduced Rayla and talked about how he's my new main, I knew that wasn't going to be a permanent change, because as you'll see after I'm done talking about this boy for probably like 2 hours, there is just so much time and effort and writing and personal attachment to Allah to just abandon him. So creating Rayla was a necessity. It was something I needed, right? It was a spark of creativity that I needed to shape and give form. But Allah is everlasting. He's always going to be a part of me. And so he's always going to be a part of my Final Fantasy XIV career. So currently at the end of 6.0 and between 6.1, he is retired. He's sort of in a forced retirement put on him by the rest of the Scions, but after he gets onto his island and he starts, taking care of things, he realizes this is kind of what he wants. So he loves it, really. But he knows it's not going to last. After everything they've been through, world-ending threats just do not seem to stop. So he figures it's probably going to be a long time, maybe even a couple years. But at the end of the day, he knows he's going to have to suit up again and go back into battle one day. Until he expires, and his soul reincarnates into whoever will go on to be the next Warrior of Light. So you might be wondering, well, so what's going on with everything after 6.1 to now and beyond? We'll talk about that later, at the end of this stream. Alright, so that is it in terms of this character profile. Nice, short, and sweet. So now we can talk a bit more about his evolution as a character, where he has come from. So for that, we are going to switch over to this, and we're going to look at some pictures while I talk. Let me pull up his story. I spent some time earlier in the week just talking about writing down his story, really. Oh, there are a few more things I can note on before we do that. Just that it doesn't really fit onto the character profile. The inspiration behind his character and his appearance comes from a few Kingdom Hearts characters and a couple anime characters. So visually, Ala is inspired by Vanitas from Kingdom Hearts. So, dark-haired, gold eyes, pale skin. And that's also, that's something personal me and Jess share. Our friendship sort of started sort of talking about Vanitas and role-playing as Vanitas way back in the day. So Ala and Eri are sort of evolutions of the interpretations of Vanitas that we used to portray. Ala has evolved a lot from that old portrayal into something nearly completely different now. Character-wise, he's a lot like Sora from Kingdom Hearts. He's a lot like different characters. He's kind of a mixture of Sora from Kingdom Hearts, Riku from Kingdom Hearts, Prompto from FF15, and Kaoru Hitachin from Ouran High School Host Club. If I had to segment his personality, his beliefs, and stuff like that, it's kind of an amalgamation of all those different characters. So yeah, that was just a fun bit of trivia I thought I'd throw in, but now we can talk about his evolution. I'm gonna have to just use pictures. Let me grab this and just scoot it over here where you guys can see it better. There we go. So, Ala's story starts pre-Calamity. He was orphaned as a kitten and separated from his twin brother. The details of that, what exactly happens, how he becomes separated, I'll be honest, Jess and I haven't really discussed in great detail. We've discussed that Eri could have been kidnapped and then sold off. We'll discuss what happened to him later. So if I were to pull anything from that, I would say that when he was just an infant, Ala and Eri's village was attacked and maybe even burnt to the ground. And the attackers kidnapped, stole Eri, and sold him off. Meanwhile, they didn't notice Ala. Ala would be later found by the Azure Dragoon, Alberic. Like I said, that part of his life isn't something I've really dived too much into, just because it hasn't come back up, and it's not... Overall, it's not too important to his story, just that he was orphaned and then adopted by Alberic, the Azure Dragoon, who was an Azure Dragoon back then. I like how my phone auto-corrected Alberic to Albert. Albert gives him the name Alamorn, as he was found in a destroyed village with no other survivors. If I remember correctly, the term Alamorn, it is dragon. It comes from the language of dragons, and I believe it means either something close to all death or extinction, something like that. So a bit of a dreary name, but a fitting one, I suppose. He was raised, if you know much about the Dragoon questline story, you'll know that Alberic also raised another child named Astinian. So, Alla and Astinian were basically kind of raised together as brothers. So, as he grew older, he would later join the Knights Dragoon alongside Astinian and Emmerich. I honestly can't remember if Emmerich canonically joins the Azure Dragoons. I mean, joins the Dragoons. But it's in my canon, so that's that. So he was best friends with them, obviously. And another good friend that he had in Ishgard was a man by the name of Harshafant. So between those three, Harshafant was probably his best friend growing up. Right, moving on next is probably an obvious point if you also have the headcanon that Ishgard used to be a terrible place to live. Being raised in conservative Ishgard and realizing he was queer. So, my interpretation of Ishgard obviously doesn't have to match anyone else's, but I know I'm not the only one who has this headcanon. I believe Ishgard is very heavily influenced by the Catholic Church and everything that goes along with that. So, knowing that Alla was queer and being raised in such a heavily religious society, it was a secret he thought he was going to keep to his grave. Especially when he thought he was basically going to stay there his entire life. But as anyone who's ever lived in the closet will tell you, trying to stay in the closet is poisonous. It is suffocating. Just every day you put on a mask and you tell people that it's real, and it's suffering. And eventually he knew he could not live like that anymore. So, he became a Temple Knight, a Dragoon, when he was 18. And that was the year that the calamity happened. Years later, when he turns 23, and he realizes that he cannot live in Ishgard anymore. Well, he realizes that he can't stay in the closet anymore, but he is too petrified of telling his friends and his family. A ridiculous notion later, as we'll talk about, but back then it was his greatest fear, so he decides to leave Ishgard altogether. And this is where the story of Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, begins. So, on the left, you could see the way he looked pre-Calamity at age 18 as a Temple Knight. When A Realm Reborn starts, this is his look. When I think of Realm Reborn Alla, this is what he looks like, is the image next to the pre-Calamity, A Realm Reborn, age 23. It's simple look, simple gear, but I love it. It's very heavily tied to the A Realm Reborn aesthetic, yet I think it's one that works and looks good. So now, a lot's about to happen, so let's talk about it. Alright. So, after he leaves the Knights and Ishgard, he's 23 and a Realm Reborn, and just starts living his life to the best that he can. Starts as sort of just a mercenary, just a hired hand, an adventurer, going around doing jobs for people. Of course, he starts to get noticed by several high-ranking people. Meets the Scions, and very quickly joins them thereafter, feeling that like this is something he could do. He sort of felt like it was starting to become his calling, just being out there protecting people, that sort of thing, and not being tied to any one specific government was very much a plus for him. After meeting the Scions, of course, he would re-meet Alphino, and as they started working together, Alphino sort of became a very, very good friend to him. Shortly thereafter, he would meet another Makote on a random day, just walking through Hawker's Alley in Limsa Lominsa. Another Makote with black hair, pale skin, and gold eyes. And one look shared between them told them, that guy looks a lot like me. And that other Makote was a man by the name of Erebus Bokairo. And when Allah told Erebus that he was adopted, and Erebus told him that he was adopted too, it didn't really take too much for them to realize exactly what was going on, that they were twin brothers. Eri told him he came from, like, his adoptive parents were very well off, well-to-dos, over in Kugane. If you know the name Bokairo, you might know exactly who his parents are. And he had a lot of responsibilities that he was sort of running away from out there in Kugane, so he came all the way out to Eorzea to sort of make it on his own. And sort of immediately dropped his last name Bokairo in deciding to take up Allah's last name of Morn, so that's how he became Erebus Morn. And the main difference between Allah and Eri is that Eri is so unapologetically queer. He is just out there, right? And flamboyant is such an understatement. And so there was that duality between Allah, who is just come out of the closet. Like, he hadn't really told anybody about it, because no one's really asked, but he was just starting to explore that side of him. And obviously after this, Eri starts to sort of like encourage him and help him come out and be more of himself. And that's really sort of how their bond started. After which, I guess if I had to place where in A Realm Reborn this was all taking place, it was around the level 30 mark. Is around there, because what happens next after that is Allah spends a bit of time away from Eri to reconnect with his father. He starts learning more about dragoons and whatnot, and wanting to improve himself, he goes to his father, who he knew was the old Azure Dragoon, while his brother Estinian was the current one. And his training starts there, As that story progresses, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, we sort of lose Estinian at the end of that quest line. And that was devastating. Especially because back then when I played, I thought Estinian was dead. So Allah thought Estinian was dead. And just that loss that filled him was life-changing. He starts clinging to Eri desperately, afraid to lose him. He's afraid to lose Alphino. He's afraid to lose everyone. And his mindset and goals switch immediately from adventure and yay, being a hero to it is now my responsibility to protect the people I love. And that is my purpose. And then the attack on the Waking Sands happens. And he loses a lot of friends. So, losing his brother, Estinian, losing his friends in the Scions and the Waking Sands, the thought at the forefront of his mind is, I need to stop the Empire. So, A Realm Reborn progresses from there. Alla and Eri work their way, taking down the Primals, then going after the Empire, fighting the Ultimate Weapon. And that's the end of 2.0. Everyone's safe, everyone's okay, but there was still a looming sense of dread, and I should say at the end of A Realm Reborn, he dons the armor that you see there in the one labeled Castrum Praetorium, and officially adopts the title of the Azure Dragoon. So, post 2.0, he's reintroduced to Alisaie, who he only met briefly, and he's curious to get to know her a little more, but she seems very distant when they re-meet. He sort of feels like he's only means to an end, and she's got her own business to take care of. She was a girl on a mission back then. And then Coils happens. And I'm gonna say that Coils was subsequent to each other. Both the first, second, and third tiers all sort of happened concurrently. So he gets to know Alisaie a little bit better, but they're so busy he doesn't really attach himself to her at that point. Still, nevertheless, she definitely earns his respect by the end of it. And then after that, after Coils, after he says goodbye to Alisaie, is when we shift to the Crystal Tower. Meeting Grahatia, Noah, Labyrinth of the Ancients, Circus Tower, World of Darkness. That is when this starts to happen. But along the way, during that quest, something starts to develop. A bit of a triangle. A dreaded triangle. As tension between Alla and Eri, when it becomes clear that they both like Grahatia. Starts as a crush, develops into something more, and it becomes apparent that they both have the same feelings. This could have easily been very bad. I should say that when they first met each other, there was such an eagerness to get to know each other, to be twins. It was so, like, fresh and exciting and new that maybe they sort of ignored certain personality traits about each other that they didn't click with, or things like that, and they would let things slide and stuff like that. But then this happens, and it sort of feels like a rift is starting to form between them. But then the World of Darkness happens, and they lose Graha to the Crystal Tower. And then immediately after that, the bloody banquet happens. And the amount of people that both of them can trust is reduced to a handful of people in a single room. And that tension evaporates. And it's just like, there's no time to focus on this. Graha's gone anyway. We need each other if we're going to survive this. Harshaphant reintroduces Amric, who is now captain of the Temple Knights. And of course, Amric and Ala are happy to see each other, and Amric invites them to Ishgard. And this is when Astidian walks into the room. Ala did not know he was alive, so the first thing he does is he walks over to Astidian, pulls off his helmet, and slaps the shit out of him. And then he hugs him and starts crying because, yeah, obviously. I'll be honest, I forget exactly what sort of excuse they gave as to why Astidian's still around after the Dragoon quest line. I think it was basically something to like the effect of, I got better. Yeah, I died, but I got better. Astidian meets Aerie for the first time, which Ala was very excited to introduce him. And Aerie hits on Astidian immediately, and that makes both Ala and Astidian uncomfortable. But then, you know, now that it's kind of obvious that Aerie is attracted to men, Ala figures it's now or never, so he comes out of the closet to Astidian. And then Astidian comes out to Ala. And Ala is so fucking shook. And Amric asks Ala how he couldn't have known. He thought it was the most obvious thing in the world. And when Ala realizes that Amric knew, like, before him, and, like, he starts having, like, all these flashbacks of just Astidian and Amric hanging out together. Like, a lot. Like, they were, like, always together back then. And then Ala realizes that Astidian and Amric were, or possibly still are, totally a thing. And then after that, we move into Heavensward. So before we move on to the next image, the image on all the way to the right is what he wore basically on the night of the Bloody Banquet and leading up to that conversation. So now we can move on to the next image, which is this. Ah, yes. Homecoming. Going back home. Showing his, where he grew up to Aerie and other Scions. Well, Alpha now, I guess. The other Scions weren't around. And of course, Harshaphant taking them to House Fortome. Ala's been there many times before. And when House Fortome was really the only house that wanted to put up with not only Ala as, like, a resident of Ishgard, but also as the Warrior of Light, he, like, officially sort of started donning their colors, started donning their armor, especially. So that's why you see the amalgamation that you see on the left side of the screen. And then as things progress, you know, he's working on clearing his name back in Eorzea so he doesn't have to stay forever in Ishgard. And then confronting the church, realizing, oh wait, it's not just personal bias, the church is actually bad. Plot twist, who would have thought? Then the vault happens. His worst fear is realized when he watches his best friend die in his arms. He was powerless. And just after everything he did for the sake of the realm, for Ishgard, for Eorzea, like something just snapped in him. And Allah succumbs to darkness. And it takes over him. And that's when he becomes a Dark Knight. I should say in how Frey fits into this is that he doesn't really. In Allah's canon, the darkness that takes over him is the same darkness that manifested into Frey. So that sort of becomes one with him and takes over him. But we'll talk a little bit more. His inner frustrations and everything, his inner emotions, manifest as darkness and take over. And we'll talk more about that later in another plot point. So he becomes a Dark Knight, and he's like, for a moment, he is gone. Mentally, he's not there. He is rage and anguish and pain, and he just picked up a sword and he was going to start walking through the streets of Ishgard, looking for people to kill. Like, he was gone, right? So if Aerie wasn't there to talk him down, to get him back to a sense of normalcy, if he didn't have Aerie, he would have hurt people. Innocent people, too. That would have been his supervillain moment. Check my notes here. But after that, everything in him is just confronting Thornton, confronting the church, taking it all down. It all needs to go. It's so ingrained into the culture and the history of Ishgard, it all has to go. So that's what his new mission was. Then, of course, we progress, move on to challenge Thornton and the Knights 12, and he wins. But Estinian picks up the second Nidhogg eye and is claimed by Nidhogg, and he loses Estinian again. It's like he, again, if Aerie wasn't there, this would have been real bad. So there is no other mission besides fuck everything he's not losing Estinian to. He lost him once, it's not going to happen again. So we move on to saving Estinian in 2.3, getting him back. But then, just when he thought he could breathe easy, this warrior of darkness shows up, and like, what is this about? Who are these, like, why are they so powerful? Why has he never heard of them before? Does it have something to do with the Asians? That sort of thing. He's reintroduced to Alize, and properly, like, she's not going anywhere this time. And with Alphino and Alize, Alla and Erebus all sort of together now, it starts a dynamic that I've never seen before, but I have grown. I adore it so much, of just the quad twins. And that's something we'll talk about later, which is something that very much influences some characters from my novel. So we move on to Stormblood, and moving on to Stormblood, we move on to this image. So Alla's 25 now, and this is sort of the look he wears before the attack on Rogger's Reach. The attack on Rogger's Reach is the next big event in his story, because it kind of marks the end of his story for a couple months. And the attack on Rogger's Reach, he challenges Xenos, and of course Xenos just sidelines him. And I mean that quite literally. He injures Allah's arm severely, his right arm severely, and it puts him out of commission for months. So a lot of early to mid Stormblood is actually very heavily Erebus' story, because Allah is just in bed and recuperating until he gets better, which is shortly before Doma Castle. Even when he's good enough to fight in fighting health, his arm is still not 100%. So he can't exactly swing around that big-ass sword anymore. So he needed something lighter, more easy to wield. And given a gift by a certain man named Hien, he is given a samurai blade, the katana. And he takes the job of samurai for the time being, until he can fully 100% recover his arm. Let me scoot this image over a bit. There we go. And that's what you see in the center image, titled Reunion Post-Injury. And this was Allah's. This was the Stormblood canon look. Like from the time that I started Stormblood, I think day one of Stormblood, I went through like the market board and just started looking at what other glamour options were new and were there. And I saw this chess piece, and I was like, I need that in my life, because it just fit him so perfectly. So that was the look for Stormblood, and I'm still very much attached to it. Every now and then I'll go and throw it back on my samurai for fun. But that image there is specifically from when he reunites with Eri, because there was a lot of hugging. So much hugging that it grosses Alizé out, who does not like the idea of affectionate twins. And then, moving on from there, Doma Castle happens. He gets even with Xenos, meets some schmuck named Asahi. Yatsuyu happens, Tsukuyomi. Alphino goes to Garlemald is probably the next big thing. Because I think this is really where he started getting to know Alizé more as an individual, because he hadn't really spent much time with her away from Alphino, you know? And like I said, their previous meeting in Coils was sort of like business. It felt more like business. But this is where he really gets to know her. He knows that she's worried about Alphino, but is trying to save face, but Allah knows better. And he talks to her about it and confronts her. Comforts her. Confronts her. Just starts yelling at her. After that, Scions start dropping. Like flies. And he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know who is going to be claimed next. He doesn't know if he's going to lose Eri. So it is a frightening time, that lead up to Shadowbringers, which is where the light wielder glamour comes in. It's very much, very still much based on the post-injury reunion outfit, but just little tweaks, more light aspected with whites and blues. Alizé drops. So it's just him and Eri, and he gets a message from some guy, some hooded guy. He doesn't know who it is, but he feels familiar. It feels like maybe he met the guy somewhere. To the first, Shadowbringers begins. So I should mention that when I made these images was probably like a good nearly 2 years ago. I think it was like in the lead up to Endwalkers when I made all these images showing his evolution over time. So not all of them are tied to canon, which I will talk about now. When I started out playing Shadowbringers, I started out as a Dark Knight, and the image you see on the left, Dark Traveler, is the image is the design I went with, because I couldn't get my hands on the AF Shadowbringers gear yet. But canonically, I've decided that the Shadowbringers AF gear for Dark Knight is a gear set he adopted as soon as he got to the first and as soon as he decided to become a Dark Knight again. These were the garments given to him by the Exarch and the people of the Crystarium. So, but before that happens, he gets to the first. And when, strangely enough, both him and Aerie were pulled, no problem. He thought they would have to be pulled separately, but they were pulled together. Which was strange to him. Why would that happen? Scoot this over. There we go. So why would that happen? But he doesn't have time to think about that as he meets this Exarch character and immediately knows why he's familiar. Both Alla and Aerie immediately know that the Exarch is G'raha. Or at least they know that it is physically G'raha's body. After what they've encountered with the Ascians and possession and things like that, they're wondering if someone else is piloting this mech, right? Is someone else in control of the Exarch's body? Is G'raha lying about not remembering about who he is? If he is lying, why is he lying? So, in the lead up to Shadowbringers, everyone knew the Exarch was G'raha. Like, everyone. Sure, there were a few doubts here and there, but at the end of the day, if you had to place money on a bet, you were going to bet that the Exarch was G'raha. And when people asked Yoshi P straight up, so the Exarch's G'raha, right? Like, that's what's going on? Yoshi P didn't say no. He said, well, it was close to the launch. He said, well, Shadowbringers is going to be out soon, and we'll see if everyone was right. Which is the smart way to answer that, I think. Don't say no. So yeah, both Alla and Aerie know that that's G'raha's body. I believe the line he said to Aerie afterward in a private conversation was, I remember those lips and the way they taste. Because the giveaway for everybody before Shadowbringers was his lips. G'raha was the only NPC that uses that specific tile set for Makote. He's the only one who uses those lips. So everyone's like, I know those lips. That's G'raha. But when it became clear that this was a fight of darkness against light, trying to bring night back and everything like that, when he knew he needed darkness, he went Dark Knight again. Through this process and talking to the Exarch and Urianger and the metaphysics of the world, of the shards, the reflections, how they interact with each other, and how the ether works and everything like that. I don't know if it's the Exarch or Urianger who points this out to them. I assume it's the Exarch, who lets Alla and Aerie in on a little something he noticed about their ether. Alla and Aerie learn about the differences in their ether. Alla is all light-based ether, and Aerie is all dark-based ether. So that immediately raises a few questions. Like, firstly, why is that a thing? That's not a known thing for twins or anything like that. Why are they different? Is this something that's always been the case? Have they always been this dually aspected, or is this something that happened along their journey? And also, if Allah is 100% light, how can he use the powers of a Dark Knight? That shouldn't be possible. So, it's thrown out that somehow Allah is borrowing powers from Eri. When he's using the powers of a Dark Knight, using that darkness, because he cannot do it on his own, he is taking power from Eri to conjure it. So, how is that happening? Somehow, Allah and Eri, their ether, their souls, are tied to each other. More than twins. Because otherwise it wouldn't be possible for Allah to just borrow the darkness from Eri. And that if this was something that went on for a long time, for possibly years, if Allah continues to be a Dark Knight for an extended period of time, it could possibly have bad effects for Erebus. Eri wasn't too worried about it, and basically said, as long as we're on the first, as long as you need the power of the darkness, until we can settle things here, you can borrow all you like. Because it hasn't had a negative effect on him yet. But because Allah is all light, because his ether can handle light easier than Ares could, Allah is the one who absorbs the light wardens. That's not something they could do together. All that light being forced into Eri could have possibly destroyed him. That's what the Exarch said. No doubt, Allah definitely had the better chance, but he knew that it was going to destroy Allah as well, as we all knew. Emmett is here. I remember when I was making these notes, I was just like, oh yeah, Emmett's here. So I wrote down, Emmett is here. Emmett's here, the story progresses, he absorbs the Light Wardens. Emmett asks Allah if he can really trust the Exarch. All those sorts of things. And then we lead up to Mount Golg. He slays innocents, absorbs that last bit of light, and it's too much. And he starts to crack and change. And then the Exarch reveal happens. The moment he gets Grahatia back, he immediately loses him. Lots of crying. Gotta stop Emmett. He was hoping maybe there could have been some common ground, but no, you done took my boyfriend. You gotta go. And he is not worrying about shattering, falling apart, which he clearly was. He had borrowed time, and he was going to use it as wisely as he could. Amrot happens. He confronts Emmett. He starts to break down. Ardbert rejoins with him. And this is an effect that I decided to put in here. Obviously, it's not tied to canon, but it is tied to my canon. That a side effect of Ardbert rejoining with him is that while, yes, it saves him from the affliction of the Light Wardens and lets him dispel that light into Emmett, which is what ultimately destroys Emmett, it sort of scarred his soul in a way that he can no longer wield darkness. So all that darkness is returned to his brother. And he can... His great sword is just a big slab of metal. He can't conjure that sort of energy anymore. Oh, lost my place in my notes. So yeah. And this is where Allah becomes a paladin. Well, because you figured, you know, paladins are all about light, right? So it's a sword. I'm used to using swords. That's what I'll do. So, again, the image on the right before the end, it's the same glamour. It's what he would have worn. But obviously he wouldn't have the greatsword. He'd have a sword and shield. Like I said, I made these images years ago. So you might wonder, okay, so they stopped Emmett, saved Graha. What happens now that Allah, Eri, and Graha are now all around and together? It was a very short conversation that basically boiled down to Allah and Eri agreeing to share Graha. Because their logic was, listen, I know you, I love you, you know me, you love me, we trust each other to the fullest, because it's been years now since A Realm Reborn. So either we can share him, or we both say hands off, and then we're both miserable, and then we both lose. So that's what happens. I'll let you imagine what Allah and Eri do to Graha once they have him alone. Laughing at my own notes. So what's the next mission? Graha is safe. Gotta save friends. That's why we were here in the first place. A little bit happens. And they re-meet Hythlodaeus, who gives them the Stone of Azem. Wheels start turning. How is this a gift for both of them? I'm sure Hythlodaeus, I didn't write it down, but Hythlodaeus would have mentioned that Allah, Eri, and Ardbert all have the same color soul. They didn't really think about it too hard until, because they were very focused on something else. But now that they're reintroduced to it, and that they can both use the stone, whatever it does, they start to realize why they're connected. And given that Eri is 100% darkness, they begin to wonder if somehow Eri is Allah's 13th reflection. And as the author, I can tell you that this is probably the most proud thing Jess and I have come up with, is that Erebus is the shard of Allah from the 13th, but instead of rejoining with him, when it attempted to rejoin with Allah, it didn't fuse, it didn't mix, and became its own entity in the womb with him, becoming one baby becomes two, twins, and that is where Eri comes from. That is probably the coolest bit of lore that I could share about these two. Obviously, we came up with that idea years ago, and now that we're exploring the 13th and the 6.x patches, we're just like, if some motherfucker walks up claiming to be the Warrior of Light's shard from the 13th, we're just gonna say that's not canon. We worked hard on that bit of lore, and it's ours. You can't take it away from us. So that's how they discover, basically. And that would lead to a lot of conversations of doubt of like, are we really like, what are we? What does this make us? But ultimately, you know, they're twins, and that's what they've always been, and that's how they'll always be to each other, regardless of whether or not they should be from different worlds, basically. Together, they defeat Elidibus, cry over Graha, because Graha's statue becomes a crystal statue. Not sad. Remember that? I cried. I cried a lot. And then back to the source. They got Graha back. Yay. Everyone's back on the source. Everyone's here. Then they have, in the small little time they have before everything goes to shit, lots of adventures with Graha, showing him around, growing closer with Alphinaud and Alisaie. Given his experience with Aerie, he starts to notice that while Alphinaud and Alisaie are, you know, they're close, they have a typical sibling relationship, he noticed there's like an invisible wall between them. And they still sort of need to work that out. And he tries to, like, nudge them in the right direction. He, in exchange, he talks to them and Aerie about how sort of being the perfect hero, this was sort of starting to wear on him a bit. He's been through so much now, and he's still, like, trying to uphold this image that everyone has in their minds of him. But all three of them encourage him that he needs to really not care about that. He needs to be his own person. You shouldn't care that much about what people who you do not know think of you. And he takes that bit of information, you know, puts it in the back of his mind and hangs on to it for a while. Xenos is back. That's weird. Some dude named Fandaniel. Why does he look like Asahi? They don't know. Must be an Ascian, right? They meet Fortunato. He does not like him. One bit. Has to stop Aerie from punching him. That was fun. And, but he gets the feeling Fortunato's not being honest. Like, he was almost like he was putting on a performance when he was disowning Alphinaud and Alisaie. So, he just thinks about that for a bit. And this is where Endwalker begins. So, we say goodbye to these images that I made several years ago, to one I made before Endwalker. Here we are. This was his look for Endwalker. It's out of all, he's had a lot of different glams and looks across the years, as you can tell from the presentation I've just showed. This is one of my favorites. If I had to pick a few, it was the Stormblood Samurai post-injury reunion outfit. Then there's this one. I really love this outfit. Let's get a better look at this outfit. There we go. There's a better look at it. This sort of starts his sort of self-acceptance arc, where he was comfortable with being queer now, obviously, thanks to his friends and Aerie. But he was still trying to find out who he is, who he wants to be, and the way he wants to portray himself, how he wants others to see him, and if he should care how others see him. This is him leaning a little bit more into being himself. It's not too terribly different besides the color. His favorite color is yellow. So, but he always thought it might have been considered a very feminine color. But he saw this cape and he loved it, and he wanted to wear it. So he's like, screw it. I'm doing this. I don't care what people think. I'm going to wear this freaking bright ass yellow cape and I'm going to love it. And I love it too. I love this look. It's a little Dark Souls, but it works. It looks good. Alright. Yeah, we can stick on this image for a while now. Actually, we'll go back to the other one just because it's a bit more of a better photo composition-wise. I think I like this photo. Endwalker starts, meets Heidelin. What the fuck is Harshaphon? What the fuck is Fortuno hiding? Mama Levier seems nice. He likes her. Why is she normal? Why is she the only normal person in Charlian? Then Garlemald is the next big event in his story because of Xenos taking over his body. His body was the one that was plucked and taken over. When Xenos gets to Camp Broken Glass, Eri immediately knows it's not Allah. They're twins. They've grown impossibly close over these last couple of years. And that connection between their souls, he's just like, more than the way Allah was walking in his demeanor that just didn't match. Subconsciously, he could feel that the other half of his soul was not present in that body. So he knew immediately, leading to a brief skirmish between Eri and Xenos in Allah's body. Allah shows up before his friends and loved ones could be attacked and stops Xenos, but scars himself in the process. I wouldn't reflect this, I would think about this till post Endwalker, which is why it's not on his model right now, but later on I put a scar on his cheek from him hurling a sword at his own face. Because he's like, screw that body, I'm saving my friends. And while Xenos almost nearly dodged it, it did scrape up his cheek pretty good. So now he has a scar there on his cheek. I think it's supposed to be on the right side of his cheek, but I don't think there's a right cheek scar option for Keepers of the Moon, so I think it's on his left cheek on the in-game model. So, all thoughts are on Xenos. Go to the moon. Fight Zodiark. The end of the world happens. Congratulations. You've won. I need some water. I've been talking for a while now. Oh god. I had this water bottle. I guess it was next to the fan on my laptop. So I just took I just took a drink of some very warm water, and that was unpleasant. Oh my god. Sorry, excuse me. So, the end of the world happens. Everything progresses the way everyone else encounters it. The next big event is really sort of the end, or just before the end. Before the final battle, Allah realizes this could be the end. This could be it. Undoubtedly, this is the biggest thing he's ever faced, and this could be it. These could be his last few days of living. And so, if it's going to be the end, he is going to be unapologetically himself. To hell with being the perfect image of a hero. He's always wanted to embrace his need to be cute. That has always been his secret desire. Like, seeing the way, certain clothes and whatnot. God, he'd love to... No, it's too cute. I couldn't. Screw it. He's going out the way he wants to go out. Which, armor-wise, you know, he needed practical armor, and he needed the best armor he could get his hands on. So Tataru hooked him up with that. But it wasn't all that cute. So what is he gonna do? He decides, well, I can dye my hair. And that is where we get to the pink hair arc of Allah. It's just, initially he was like, man, maybe I should start small. Maybe I can go blonde or something, you know, that's different from black, and it's very vibrant, and you know, but no, screw it. This is it. This could be the end. We're going pink. I want pink hair, damn it. Just runs into a barber shop, slams on the table. Give me pink hair, damn it. So that's how this starts. Now, let's get a better look at the armor, which again, provided by Tataru. Look at him. Look at him go. I love him. The inspiration for this armor is basically me also saying to myself, this is the final battle, right? Like the final battle after like a 10-year story. It needs to look fantasy armor as shit. You need to look like you're about to fight the final boss. So I remembered, I believe this is called the Diamond Set, the chest plate from the second tier of the Omega raids, and how it was just high fantasy all to hell. So I was like, that's good. It's got that high fantasy element. It's also very silver and shiny with gold accents like the Endwalker AF gear. And it's got a cape. Allah decided that he loves capes now. So yeah, that's how this came about. Oddly enough, these two images I didn't have beforehand. I had to go grab them from my Let's Play when Endwalker launched. So yeah. Moving on. He always wanted to embrace his need to be cute, so he's gonna be cute. He dyes his hair pink, the adorable side of him that only his twin, Alphino, Auze, and Graha ever got to see. Now on display for the whole world. And then, you know, they go to Ultima Thule. Lots of hardships were had. He lost his friends along the way, but he was determined to get them back, even if he didn't know how. And then they save the universe with the power of love and friendship, leading to the final fight with Xenos. Xenos acknowledges Allah's new appearance and recognizes this is who Allah has always been. And he's happy that Allah would show his true self to him in their final battle. Tells him this life is fleeting and he shouldn't spend it worrying about what others think of him. Now before all this, Xenos was nothing to Allah. After Stormblood, he stopped thinking about him, just did not occupy any space in his head at all. Then he comes back and he's like, what the fuck is this? What, didn't we already do this song and dance? Why is he back? Right? Then Camp Broken Glass happens, and it became, I'm going to put you in the dirt myself. Right? That sort of mentality. Needless to say, Allah has never liked Xenos. But after that, after those words from Xenos of all people, Allah didn't like Xenos at all, especially after Garlemald, but he appreciates the fact that Xenos didn't care about the image of a hero either. That he accepted Allah for who he really was. So he'll never call Xenos his friend, obviously, but I don't know. It was just, I guess, a moment of solidarity that he had with Xenos. That Xenos just wanted Allah the way he truly was. So basically, if his enemy wanted that from him, the rest of the world better respect that as well. And then that leads to the end of Endwalker, and kind of the end of this major chapter of Allah's life. Starting from that kid in Ishgard who was crippled by internalized homophobia and that sort of thing, and leaving, needing to be himself, but even when he thinks he is, he's still got a limiter on that he doesn't take off for years. And at the end of this journey, he really just embraces himself. He's got no shortage of people to help him live just the life he wants to live. So there's no reason to hide. Even if there was, he doesn't care. He'll be him, no one else, never be anyone else ever again. And that is the end of that arc. At the end of 6.0. After 6.0, Allah unofficially retires, as does Eri. Allah takes up Tataru's offer for the island sanctuary, and Eri goes to fulfill his responsibilities in Kugane, leading to the longest period of time since they first met that the two were away from each other. And, you know, they've been through so much that it wasn't anxiety-inducing to basically say, we can take vacations away from each other. We can spend some time away from each other now. We know we'll always find our way back to each other. And that's kind of how it ends. Relationship continues with Graha, happily. They're not married yet, I'll say. They keep in contact with all the Scions, especially Alphino and Alze, who over time have sort of become like a little brother and sister to Allah and Eri. So that leaves the question of what the hell do we do now? Oh, I didn't even show the images. So here we have his post-Endwalker look. Casually, if he needs to employ a martial art in his retirement, he goes with Bard. Or, I guess more specifically an archer. I'm not sure how much of the song aspect he's tied to. Never really thought about it. But it's something that Graha would teach him to do, because that was sort of Graha's first job as well. It's something new that he could learn in his retirement. Now then, moving on from that, his retirement. In his retirement, he starts to let his hair grow out a little longer again. And of course, there's Eri, who I believe just said when last we talked about it that when Eri returns to Kugane, he starts working with the, I'm probably mispronouncing this, the Sekisugumi, to help maintain order in Kugane. And this isn't tied to Allah's lore anymore, but I did make this image, which is very fitting. When New Adventure came out, Newfound Adventure was announced, and they showed off that promotional artwork. A lot of people on Twitter started making like their own version of the artwork, featuring the Warrior of Light and their own individual evolutions throughout the years. And this is Allah's. This is one that I made. So yeah, I think that's a good way to round out his story. This image has come to mean a lot of things. This image is basically the entirety of his character arc. Just look at how different he is now compared to how he used to be. Especially to that Temple Knight just above his right shoulder there. But now this leads to my current, well, previous predicament that I had up until recently, where an issue, I don't know if other people have been having it, but I know I certainly have, where ever since Endwalker ended, ever since 6.0 came to a close, credits rolled, and I tied a nice little bow on Allah's character arc. The story continued, and I'm just like, what the fuck do I do with this character now? Because, like, everything wrapped up so nicely, it was kind of difficult to just be like, yeah, like, the main scenario quest is still going, but what is Allah's hopes and dreams right now? It's not this. He's so tired. He just wants some time to himself. He wants to relax. So when Island Sanctuary came along, I'm like, this is it. This is what Allah wants. This is everything he wants. He wants to just be away from the troubles of the world. He feels like he's earned his rest. And, like, if his friends can just keep out of trouble, then, like, maybe he can rest. So, when that is what my character really wants, but the story's still ongoing, I needed something. I needed something new. I thought maybe I could make a new character. Or something. Now, originally, when I made Rayla, that was out of a need born from a moment of frustration. For those who aren't aware, I made Rayla in response to Yoshi P's statements about FF16 and how there really isn't a whole lot of racial diversity in the characters. How it's kind of all white people because it's medieval. It's inspired by medieval England, and that's just realistic, which it wasn't. There was tons of people of color around in those days, even in England. But, like, that moment of frustration led to me needing to insert a native character, someone based off my culture, off my racial background, introduce more people of color into something I love. And if I couldn't do it with 16, I'll do it with 14. And yes, 14 has a vast cast filled with multiple cultures and people of color, but I still felt that need to do something, which is where Rayla came from. The problem is that I started thinking about Rayla's story and how it could be different from Allah's, and I remembered how Allah, while being a Dark Knight for so long, never interacted with Frey. Not in the sense that the community interacts with Frey and how they know Frey. Like I said before, Allah's Frey was basically just that inner frustration and darkness that took over him completely, instead of finding another host in a separate body. So I thought I could heavily tie Rayla's story to that of the Dark Knight, in that when he's starting his adventure, he just wants to go on an adventure, and he gets very much addicted to the sense of being a hero. Just full savior complex. But then that breaks the night of the Bloody Banquet. And suddenly he's just like, everything I've ever done has been for nothing. Everything I've done for these people, and this is how they treat me. Which leads to his inner frustrations taking the more traditional role of Frey. But at the end of the day, he still doesn't, even though he has these frustrations, he doesn't want to hurt people. So he sort of makes a compromise with Frey of, I'm going to continue saving people, of helping people, but I'm going to do it my way. Fuck the rules, fuck the laws. I will go full vigilante if I have to. I will do what I feel is right. And that is sort of the arc Rayla goes through in Heavensward, where he fully adopts the moniker of a Dark Knight and sort of becomes a sort of Batman-like character. I guess more specifically, more like a Nightwing sort of character. He's nowhere near as serious as Batman. But then, you know, I'm starting to think about, like, what happens after Stormblood, after Heavensward, after Stormblood, after Shadowbringers. Then I arrive at the same problem I had with Allah. What the fuck do I do after 6.0? I still don't have an answer for that, of how I can take this pre-established character who's come to the end of their major arc, and what do I do with them now? And that's where I started entertaining the idea of, what if I make a new character that comes in after 6.0? What if Allah does his character arc, 6.0 happens, he saves the day, he retires, like I said before, as long as he possibly can. But while he's doing that, who's gonna take care of, well, there's the others. Who's gonna take care of all the other world's troubles? You know, there's the other Scions out there as well. And like I said, it was the Scions who sort of, like, pushed him into retirement. So they don't want to go banging down his door for every single problem that pops up. So they start turning to other people, multiple people, to pick up the slack left in the wake of the Warrior of Light's absence. And one of those people is my new character. This is the part where we are talking about the future. From 6.1 onwards, possibly into 7.0. Until such an event where it's like, either I can give Allah a new purpose in this later stage, or just a world-ending event that cannot be handled by anyone else. So they reach out to new adventurers, you know, would-be heroes, see who fits, who doesn't, who works well with others, and that sort of thing. And there's no shortage of adventurers out there. But there is one guy. One rather small guy who has sort of already made a name for himself. He's not world famous, obviously, but should you be traveling through Ul'dah, you may have heard of this man. You may have even encountered him. Wrong image. That person is Flame Captain Averton Mist. This is my latest Warrior of Light, who is, for the time being, tied directly to Allah. Allah's character arc has ended, and now a new one with a new character has begun for 6.1 and beyond, that of Averton Mist. Oh boy. Shall we pull this back up? So, what do we know about this boy? His age is undetermined. There are certain things, I'll say that there are certain things that I hope happen in 7.0, but I don't know if they were going to. One of those things is a time skip. I really really want us to be able to let's just jump 5 years into the future. Just at a minimum 5 years, please. I want to see the world state update. How does it look after things start to rebuild and things like that? And also, that is going to be the only way we are ever going to see adult Alpha No and LZ. Or taller Alpha No and LZ. In my canon, the time between A Realm Reborn and 6.0 Endwalker is 3 years. So all starts at 23 and it ends when he's 26. That applies to everyone. So everyone is aging 3 years. The only characters that have an issue with this are Alpha No and Alze, who start A Realm Reborn at 16. So in my canon, they are currently 19. It's been addressed that Elzen can be very late bloomers and that they do not get tall, possibly into their 20th year. So it always felt right for it to be like a 3-year gap between ARR and Shadowbringers, just because I wanted there to be time between when Alla and Eri lost Grawha to when they got him back. Otherwise, if it's just like, hey, remember when we lost our boyfriend like 2 months ago? That's too short of a time. There's not enough time to grieve and even maybe get over it and move on. It's such a fresh wound. It's like, why was he even gone at all, you know? So 3 years is what I had there. So Alpha No and Alze are 19. And I wanted Averton to be the same age as Alpha No and Alze. So I was just gonna put 19. But I don't know if we are lucky and we get a time skip, he'll be 5 years older. So for the time being, we will just say that Averton is the same age as Alpha No and Alze, which to me is 19, but to others will not be. You can be like, how did he become a fucking captain of the Immortal Flames at age 16? I don't know. How did Alpha No and Alze save the world? Birthday. What is his birthday? I haven't decided this really. Feels maybe wintry, like January 18th. Yeah. Race Lalafell. Alias Flame Captain, which is sort of the only official alias he's ever had. Pronouns he, him. Sexuality, I'm gonna say bi. Nationality, Ishgard. He is also from Ishgard, and I'll admit this is because I wanted him to have a tragic backstory, and Ishgard is kind of the only place that I know in my heart was a terrible place to live once upon a time. Patron deity, I'll say Azema. Hope I'm spelling that right. Jobs, Red Mage. Hair color, red. Eye color. Now this is something he keeps secret. We'll tell why later. Skin. Tan. I'm trying to tan can mean so many different things. I'm trying to. It's a very warm orange shade. I don't have a name for that color off the top of my head. So we'll say a warm, deep tan. Height? I'll be honest, I don't know like cannon heights for Lalafell. It's very small, obviously. He is the smallest you can make a Lalafell, so I know that much. Let's look it up. We have the power of the internet. Lalafell height. Alright, that's max height. Okay. Yeah, he's tiny. 210. Oh boy. Even that feels real small. Damn, that's... I mean, it's almost 3 feet. But yeah, but wow. He is so small. Damn. 210. Build... Potato. It's the only kind of build Lalafell can have. Favorite foods. What is this man like? He is a fresh character, by the way. This is something I only came up with like last week. I don't have... Well, we don't... Well, this ale. He drinks a lot. And if he's as... and he is not old enough to drink that yet. But he drinks it anyway. Ale. Best friends. Does he have a best friend? I don't have names for them, but we'll say... Oh, get out of there, Graha. In the immortal... Is it 2 M's? Flames. Nemesis. Ishgardians. He's a little prejudiced towards Ishgardians for personal reasons. Not entirely justified, at least anymore. Something he'll have to get over as time goes on. Sorry, this chair's getting uncomfortable. Theme. Does not have one yet. TBD. Fears? What are you afraid of? Not being able to do things himself. We'll touch on that in a moment as we talk about who he is as a character. Hobbies. Drinking. Other things. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Goals. What is his goal? Right now. Flame General. So, at face value, this is Everton Mist, the new character in the story. Who is he? Where does he come from? You see that he comes from Ishgard. You see the name Mist as his surname. And if you know French, you might know that word Everton. Or as I think it's pronounced Everton. So what do these 3 things have to do with each other? He was an orphan in Ishgard. Many things could have happened that led to that. I'm thinking his mother, maybe a merchant before the calamity, before the borders were closed. Maybe something not so great happened to her. And leaving this poor little Lalafell infant orphaned on the streets. There wasn't a great orphanage in Ishgard until very recently, as crafters may know. So he was kind of just raised on the streets along with other orphan kids, which is how he adopted the name Mist. All orphans of Ishgard are referred to as Mist. If you're wondering where the name Greystone comes from, like Harshfont Greystone, that refers to bastard children. So bastard children get the name Greystone, orphan children get the name Mist. And Averton is what a lot of the adults would refer to him as. They would refer to him as basically a runt. That's what that word sort of means. He didn't understand it back then, obviously, but it's kind of the only name he's ever known, so he kind of just sticks with it. Obviously, he didn't stick around in Ishgard forever. At a very young age, he left. I would say after Ishgard opened back up, he would leave. He saw that maybe there was the potential for things in Ishgard to get better, but he didn't want to put money on it. So he left. And just went out into the world hoping to find something better. And he finds Ul'dah, a predominantly Lalafell civilization, founded by Lalafells, in fact, where people took him seriously. He wanted to be a temple knight, but they weren't about to let a Lalafell be a dragoon. And so when he left, found Ul'dah, and people there started taking him seriously. He's like, oh, you're just another guy, just another schmuck walking down the street. Oh, you want something? Go do this mission for me, this duty, whatever. Be a mercenary, go be an adventurer, do whatever. He's stuck around, and he's sort of just been calling Ul'dah his home ever since. Very quickly went from the status of an adventurer, of a sellsword, and enlisted in the Immortal Flames. A Lalafell looking to prove himself very quickly caught the eye of a certain Pippin, and he was given every opportunity to prove himself, and he has. Slowly, surely, rising up the ranks, and eventually claimed the title of captain, Flame Captain Averton Mist. And that is where I am with his character. He is a blank slate that I can do anything with. And that's been very freeing, that I can take what the MSQ gives me now in stride and see how that develops this new character who still has feelings and motivations and goals that he's looking to achieve, and who still has unresolved things about his past, about his lore. I will let you in on a little secret that he does not know about himself. He is one of the last surviving heirs of the long since assumingly dead Sildin civilization, of the Sildin nation. He is royalty, but doesn't know it. The main reason for that is because I was way too jealous of everyone around Allah being royalty. Eri comes from a very wealthy family in Kugane, so he was basically Hingan royalty. Alphino and Auze come from a very well-to-do family in Sharlayan, and they're idolized in the frickin' academy there. So they're like Charlian royalty. And then there's Graha, who carries the blood of Allegan royalty in him. Everyone around Alla was freaking royalty. And it was maddening. So I was like, my next character is going to be royalty, and he doesn't even know it. So he is the heir to the Sylvan throne. A throne that doesn't exist anymore. But it gives me something that I can work with in the future. Whether or not he has any siblings, I will not disclose at the moment, because I haven't made up my mind. I haven't made up my mind if there's any other heirs out there, and whether or not that would become a problem. Because, like, the Sylvan civilization I don't think is going to come back anytime soon, but you never know. You never know how things will manifest. We recently dived into the Sylvan subterrane, which is something I have to re-explore now and re-watch to really absorb all the lore that gave us. But, yeah. Like I said, this guy has been very freeing to me recently, because now I don't have to think about it. I can take new information the MSQ gives me and parse it later and see how that affects Averton. To Averton, 6.1 and forward, and up to 7.0 is basically his Realm Reborn. He's made a name for himself, and he's getting tied into some deep shit. So, what's it? Yes, I'm Flame General Averton. You want me to go to the Void? That's basically what's going on right now. So, it's, we'll see what happens over the course of this next major arc. He has not met Alla. He's met some of the Scions. He's met Tataru, and I'll say he's met Kryl. And who else has gone along with this? He's met Graha, Estinian, Yustola, Alphino, and Alze. He has not met Thancred or Uriansha yet. And a wider variety of the minor Scions. But yeah, I hope you guys look forward to seeing his story develop as I do. It's a weird problem to have, right? But it's a very specific problem that I had with Alla. Like I said, Alla's not gone forever. I'm just waiting for the right moment to reintroduce him. Something where Averton will say, I can't handle this. He's not the Shard of Zem. He hasn't been rejoined with, other reflections and whatnot and all that stuff. He's not the Warrior of Light. He has the Echo. He's got that much going for him, but, lots of people have the Echo. Lots of Scions have the Echo. So, I'm just glad that I can stop worrying about this and just go back to the days of just being like, oh, it would be cool, this sort of thing tied into that. But I think that is all I have to say, really. I'll give you guys another look at him. There he is. This is an image I drew a couple days ago. Actually, this is a sticker design I'm making for FanFest. Don't know. I guess I haven't said officially on the channel, though. I've been saying it a lot on Twitter. I'll be going to FanFest, North American FanFest. And me and my friends, Kevin and Jess, 2 of us got picked in the lottery, so that gave us enough for 3 tickets, and we're going. Our flights are booked. Our stay is booked as well. The place we'll be staying is booked. All that's left is to save up money for the trip and see what happens there. And going forward, starting at 6.1, Averton Mist will be the person you see in MSQ for 6.4 and onward. And we should be learning about 6.4, or at least beginning to learn about 6.4 very soon. So, yeah. Oh, it's been a long stream, but I'm looking forward to the future and developing this character in front of you guys. This character's development will be like a frickin' those Japanese restaurants where they make the food in front of you. You'll see me craft Averton in front of you guys and be like, oh, what if I added this, or take this event that just happened and like gave him emotional trauma from it. So I'm very excited, and like I said, I know Allah's going to come back eventually. We'll just have to wait and see when that will be. So, like I said, I'm thinking... I haven't decided if the 24-man and the raids are canon yet. I haven't decided if they're canon to a story yet, because I don't know how much that's going to tie back into the MSQ. So if it really doesn't, that's not something Averton would handle. Because I feel like that's very heavily tied to the Shard of Zem. But if it doesn't really come up in the MSQ like Crystal Tower did, then it's something I can kind of ignore and leave out of my canon. If so, Allah's taking care of that. But there are 2 more images I can show you guys before I go of Return Arc Allah. Earlier, I mentioned Allah's aliases of the Warrior of Light, obviously, and the Azure Dragoon, obviously. But an idea I was playing around with back in 6.1 and 6.2 is, well, now he's just being himself. What does that look like? What does he want? So that mostly reflects in his sense of fashion now, which, while on duty, looks a little something like this. His other alias I mentioned was the Wicked White, and this is a moniker people would give him when he starts walking around in this, and they start seeing the Warrior of Light dressed like this. It's an aesthetic I don't really know how to describe. It's gothic, but not too serious. It's kind of spooky, sort of like Halloween fun gothic, right? But with white, heavily featuring white. It's entirely light aspected, except for a few dark accents and the metals and whatnot. So I don't know what to call this aesthetic, just that I call the look the Wicked White, which is the title I said before people start to give him. Or maybe more specifically, that's something Graha gave him from their time in the first. Have a better look at it. There we go. Very proud of this picture. So, when Allah inevitably comes back, this is what he's going to look like. Like, Allah Returns will be the name of the fucking patch, basically. Who knows when that'll be? It could be as soon as 7.0, depending on what happens, right? But I have a substitute now that I can work with, and that's very good for my mental health. One last detail. When I made those images, this haircut wasn't around. I said that Allah was going to let his hair grow out, and he will, so you guys can look forward to that someday, I'm sure. Whether it'll be on Samurai, I don't know, but probably. Just so I can keep that glam. He's not going to be a monk, that's for certain. And that is officially it. I'm out of pictures. I'm out of lore to tell. So we've reached the end of the stream. Thanks guys so much for sticking around, for checking this out, for listening for 2 hours and 7 minutes of me talking about my precious OC. And more streams in the future. Of course, we'll have another writing stream this Sunday, which will be tied to my novel, Infinite Mageworks. We will be looking at the various nations. Not the entirety of the world, just because I haven't made out that map in my head yet of what that looks like. So it's kind of a Final Fantasy XIV idea of things where the story takes place in Eorzea. Here's a map of Eorzea. Ignore the other shit around it. That's not important right now. So we'll be taking a look at the nations that are directly involved in that novel, as well as the religions and cultures, and possibly the races as well. So that'll be a fun little lore dump that I know my friend's looking forward to, because he's always asking me, so like, I need more lore. Tell me more about the lore. Tell me more about the background, the religions, everything. He's very supportive. Thank you, Kevin. I need that. And but before that, Saturday, we will be streaming Resident Evil 4 Remake, so look forward to that as well. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment, and I'll be sure to read it and respond to you when I can. And follow me on the socials at MemoryOfDarksky all across the board. Twitch, Twitter, TikTok. And I'll see you guys in the next stream. Thanks for stopping by. Till Saturday. See you then.